Well, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
And good afternoon, everyone at home. Are we live today? So far, we got a live stream. Sometimes it works for a couple minutes, and maybe God will bless us today and get this out to everyone. It's a very important message I need to bring you today. Years ago into the church, we would sit back year after year waiting for events to take place that we could recognize that might lead us into an end-time scenario. But now it seems like you just wake up every day and the events are taking place that cannot be denied, that there's something to it. Today's message is going to be one of those stories I'm going to be bringing you. I'm calling it the Prophetic Proclamation of Doom. It was delivered November 1st, 2021 by Prince Charles at the time. I believe what he did there, without his knowledge, is he opened the door for what God's told us to watch for that will bring us to the next leg of prophetic fulfillment, bringing us into the final 7 years, beginning with the lean years and eventually marching us to the seals in Revelation. Now that's a lot to say packed into a statement that I'm going to be bringing you in just a few minutes. I'm bringing you about a minute and 17 or 20 seconds of it. It was only about 7 to 10 minutes long that he delivered it on this day. But it's important to understand not only what he said, but the context of the time that it was delivered. So I'm going to do that today. I'm going to begin by setting the path for what is inevitably going to be a prophetic warning of doom for this world. It was less than a year ago, Prince Charles, before he became the king, delivered an address before the global political leaders at the World Leaders COP26 conference dealing with climate control. At that meeting were 120 world leaders. There were over 40,000 prominent attendees from around the world. There were 22,274 party or government delegates who represented their nations at this event. And the media covered it with nearly 3,900 media representatives. It was the most eventful, most powerful event for climate control since it was instituted. It was the 7th such event since 2015, if that brings anything into mind. Bring us in a 7-year period from the time of the blood moons. In the 7 years that led us to 2.5 to 3.5 years, depending on which moon you look at, for the heavenly signs. And to the period of time where we are today, coming into an end of a Shemitah year, and possibly leading us into, if the scenarios of what we're reading right in Scripture actually take place, the final 7 years, complete 7 years before we lead into the return of Jesus Christ. Now, I'm saying that with all confidence that I believe what God has led us to is true. Now, I'm not saying I know the day or the hour, but what we have been putting together for the last 7 years, piece by piece, through a puzzle, piece here, piece there, every single one of those pieces has brought about the next stage in the time frame that God wanted it to be brought out. See, God has a purpose. I believe that speech will become a deadly prophetic proclamation of doom. Let's talk about that today. Before I give you the video, I want to set the stage for which it was given. To get a clear picture, we need to recognize the time frame in which it was given. November 1st, 2021. May not sound like anything, but November 1st, 2021 is All Saints' Day, which I thought was absolutely phenomenal because, you see, All Saints' Day is a day that is established by the Catholic Church to honor all the men and women who have been canonized by the church. So he chose to deliver this message, which eventually God shows us in Revelation, if it comes to fulfillment, is the rise of the beast and actually going into effect. And he delivers it on man's calendar on the day they honor dead. Unbelievable. But what about on God's calendar? Does it fit the biblical season of the fig tree? Jesus Christ says, when you see all these things come to pass, then you know that it's getting close. Look what it says in verse 32. Now learn a parable of the fig tree. When his branch is yet tender and puts forth leaves, you know that summer is nigh. So likewise, when you see all these events, know that it is near, even at your doors. When I heard that speech, it just sent a chill through me. Because I believe what God has showed us is He has given us the insight into the next stage of what He intends to do to bring about fulfillment. So now let's go back and look at it from God's mindset. If we don't understand what God's doing and His mindset, we miss what's taking place. Ezekiel chapter 8, verse 1. And it came to pass in the 6th year, in the 6th month, and the 5th day of the month, that I sat in mine house, and the elders of Judah sat before me, and the hand of the Lord fell there upon me. And He put forth in the form of a hand, and He took me by the lock of my head, and in the spirit He lifted me between the earth and heaven, and He brought me in the visions of God to Jerusalem. So what God was doing through Ezekiel is He literally picked him up by the lock of his hair, whether in vision He didn't say, but it looked like it was, and He carried him over Jerusalem, and He showed him piece by piece as he got closer and closer to the Holy of Holies, the sins that Israel was bringing about. What struck me as I thought about this actually this morning, I talked to Steve Council about this before I came here. I said there's a piece of insight that we hadn't seen yet in this verse. God mentions nothing about timing in this. What He was showing him was the sins of Israel. All the information that God's been giving to us in this period of time is focused on timing of the events. Because you see, God's already showed us what's evil. He's already showed us how we're supposed to live. He showed us where the evil is going to be going to. What He's been doing for you and I is telling us when it's going to happen before it happens. That is an incredible insight what God's given us from that. So now we want to look at this from as if God was showing us and telling us what's going next. If we were looking for a roadmap and God says, listen, I'm going to see you in the kingdom, all right? I'm going to be there with my son and we'll meet in the kingdom. And you can say, well, how do I get there? He said, well, let me give you a roadmap. And here's when I want you to be there. I want you to be there when I get there. So when Jesus Christ stands on the Mount of Olives with His feet there, He wants us there when He's there. These events got to take place and they have to be fulfilled before He gets there. And this is what God's been showing us. So by understanding the events that took place from the beginning of the fig tree season, and as we have been able to determine, the beginning of the fig tree season began actually in 1917, when you've seen General Allenby walk into Jerusalem and all the Turkish people move out of Jerusalem, fulfilling prophecy. And in the prophecy it fulfills, it said, from that day till the end, it would not stop. So God has been on a countdown since that day, bringing us to the time just before the return of Jesus Christ. We will be witnesses of these events today that fulfill the end time prophecy. I want you to think about this for just a second. One of the things God wants us to do is to record these things in our minds and in our hearts and our spirit. And we've been recording them in DVD and writing things down and documenting all of these events. It's very similar to like the apostles. Every one of the apostles had a different assignment. They were all to record certain events and to be put into place so that when the next generation took over, they have a history of what took place. And God has done that from the beginning of time. And I have no doubt that when we move into the kingdom, when Jesus Christ is back on this earth, that there will be documentation of these years taking place before those in the millennial reign at that time. So it's important that we pay attention, that we document, and we verify what God's been doing and showing us, laying Him out in the Bible, because it says everything pertaining to Jesus' first coming was fulfilled. There's no reason to doubt that everything will not be fulfilled for His second coming. And you and I are being a part of that. This event, I believe, is going to be one of those events that will be recorded. Not my sermon, I'm not trying to say my sermon, the speech that will document events in the kingdom. The key to these insights is the understanding of when they occur in God's timeline. So let's take that just briefly. I'm not going to spend a lot of time in timeline today. I only want to use these to set the stage of where we are today. Matthew 24 says, "There will be great tribulation, such was not since the beginning of this world to this time, and no, nor ever shall be again. And except those days should be shortened, there should be no flesh be saved, but for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened." And in God's mercy, what he has laid out for us is a time frame. That time frame is what we're looking at, that if that war didn't stop, it is possible, but the time Ivy might came, there'd be enough bombs to destroy mankind off this earth. And God said, from that time when it was possible to destroy all flesh, that generation should not perish. And when we look at that time, which I'm going to show you today, that time brings us in 70 years given man to possibly 80, God says, brings us to 2020 to 2030. And we are in that time frame right now. So here we see that except those days should be shortened, but God's going to step into mankind before he destroys himself and save mankind. I'm putting in the time frame around World War II. Now it's interesting that all these events evolve around a 7-year period. All of these things were laid out without us ever knowing it, what was taking place. 1924, Hitler's first attempt to take over Germany and control it. 1931, when he finally got put into his position to move to taking control by 1933. The beginning of World War II, the end of World War II, and the possibility to destroy all mankind. Somewhere God says he would cut time short. So even in the time frame God's showing us there, we're looking at events that parallel the day you and I live in today. So if we put those 7 years up and then we begin to mark them where we are today, what are we looking at? It's interesting. We start with 2008, 2015, 2022 where we are today, 2029, and 2036. Every one of those, what we didn't understand years ago, are 7 years ending in Shemitah years. Every one of them. And if we look at these events, you will see what lines up through the story events is identical to the timing of what goes on from the previous, from 1924 to 1952. Particularly interesting is this, 1938 to 1945. When it began, World War II was 1938. The previous years were lining up for the assault. We have been watching that spiritually since 2015 of these alignments. Because you see, the Pope has put an agenda out, the 2030 agenda. Nobody knew what that meant 7 years ago. But what I'm going to show you today is he has been busy building, formulating, aligning, putting everything in its place. And that speech just weaponized what he needs to do to put us in that war footing with the spiritual battle. All right, let's move on. God's timeline shows us the shadow of the Shemitah years. 2015 is a pivotal moment in time. We didn't realize how big a moment that really was until sometime later when that man from Rome came to America, went to the White House, and stood before the whole world and then told us what he intended to do. Nobody knew what it was, except a handful of people around the world. We line these events up, so if we look at these events right now, we see the end of World War II, the beginning of World War II, and the rise of power. So what you're looking at, what God has given us, is the form of physical and the latter spiritual. What's also lined up, what nobody wanted to pay any attention to, was right here. They're called blood moons. That was the 8th time that blood moon tetrads fell on the holy days since the time of Christ. What that told us was it's marking time now to the countdown. It's like a new beginning. And that new beginning, what God was telling us, is on its way to fulfillment. Quite interesting what was taking place there. So we see Hitler rising into power. And we see that his terror lasted all the way to 1945. Revelation 12 shows that he knows he has but a short time. I'm here to tell you today that it is quite possible, whether it begins this 7-year period or not, but I think we're beginning to move into, within the next 7 years, the beginning, if we have not already started, the 7 seals. When you look at what's going on around the world, it's impossible to keep up with everything. I'm looking through the internet this morning and I found out Alaska is facing its worst tropical storm in 50 years. The news hasn't even covered it. They expect many of the places to be flooded. Around the whole world, the weather's in just chaotic mess. New wars breaking out in smaller countries, just like it was in the 20s and the 30s. So now, with that being said, let's get back to now King Charles, when he delivered this sermon, this speech, November 1st, 2021. Let's play that video.
As we tackle this crisis, our efforts cannot be a series of independent initiatives running in parallel. The scale and scope of the threat we face call for a global systems-level solution based on radically transforming our current fossil fuel-based economy to one that is genuinely renewable and sustainable. So, ladies and gentlemen, my plea today is for countries to come together to create the environment that enables every sector of industry to take the action required. We know this will take trillions, not billions of dollars. We also know that countries, many of whom are burdened by growing levels of debt, simply cannot afford to go green. Here we need a vast military-style campaign to marshal the strength of the global private sector, with trillions at its disposal, far beyond global GDP, and with the greatest respect, beyond even the governments of the world's leaders. It offers the only real prospect of achieving fundamental economic transition.
Well, let's unpack what you just heard. I don't know if you really comprehend it. And when I had to listen to this several times to make sure I understood what he said. So we take a look at this. The only real solution where we cut it off at, the only real solution, he has just eliminated God. God's not in the picture here. We need to understand that. Everything he said we need to do has been parroted by the Pope since 2015, the 2030 agenda. And here we have in America, now we have a president, and now we have the abandonment of God and bringing in every evil, sinful way that we can imagine. And now we have Ephraim and then Manasseh, the king now, turning his back on God, the strongest of the nations of the house of Israel, in the end time, walking away from God. And it's interesting that this comes out now, right before the end of this 7-year period. Now, let's take a look at just a few things of what he said there. We need a vast military-style campaign to marshal the strength of the global sector. He just told us that the weaker countries in the world, they're not going to have the money to do this. So we're going to marshal people. When you see them marshaling like they did during World War II, they confiscate businesses, people, they put them in jail if they don't listen. Have we heard about that in Revelation? Oh yeah, there's a buying and selling. And if the man doesn't listen, they're going to put him to death. So this is really interesting what we're laying out here from an Israelite nation with trillions, and he did say his disposal. So we're talking about putting together an organization that has one man to rule with power, with charisma, and how's he going to do it? And he'll have more power far beyond the global GDP. Now, what that's telling you is it doesn't matter what the world makes, he's going to have more money than the world can put together. That's gross domestic product. He said the only way this is going to work is get this guy in there, give him the trillions of dollars, and put him to work if we're going to save this planet. How's that going to work? And listen to this. And with the greatest respect, even beyond world leaders. So every country is going to have to be subservient to what this person and the group he works with him. Is it possible there could be 10? We're going to take a look at that. It offers the only real solution. He gave that before the most powerful people in the world to applause. So what are we looking at here? Revelation 17:12 says, and the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings. So when you see what's pulling us together, he's talking about not a religious structure, he's talking about a beast power, which will be run by the woman sitting on the beast, and control and power. Because they don't get kingdoms, because they could be like businesses, organizations, conglomerates from around the world. The beast power has been putting that together for the last 7 years. And I'm going to show you that today. So now when we look at that, let's take a look at Daniel 2, with the 10 toes. Now, we're familiar with that, so I'm not going to go into all of the images of that beast. But if you have not studied that, you might want to refresh your memory, going back to Daniel chapter 2 and Daniel chapter 7, talking about this great beast. Remember, it starts off with gold and works all the way down to its 10 toes mixed together with iron and clay. So what we're seeing putting together here is Prince Charles just said we need to marshal everybody together. It's not going to stick, but we just need it for a little while to control everything, to save the planet. We brought this out in 2020, February 2020. Prince Charles's speech was a call to arms. That's what it was, a call to arms, and he launched the end time scenario for the fulfillment here. Because you see, the Pope has gone as far as he could go until he gets the second leg of power. And Prince Charles just called for the marshal of the troops to give him that second leg of power. So now, what am I talking about that? Let's take a look briefly at this. This was from February 21st, 2020. He says, tax the rich, France calls for the global wealth redistribution. He said, I ask you to ensure humanity is served by wealth and not ruled by it. So now we're talking about the beginning of a global restructuring, which we're talking about the Great Reset, and it constitutes the structure of sin. He said, if you take that money and you don't give it away and you can cut taxes for people, then that's a sin. In other words, you can't help those people who've already earned it. You got to take it from them and give it to those who don't have it. If you don't do that, that's a sin. He was delivered in a passionate international wealth redistribution speech, and it was done before applause. He's creating a socialist world. The Bible calls it the beast. We know it as the beast of Revelation, chapters 13 and chapter 17. So let's put it together. Now we're back into our time frame. The time frame. So when we look at this, what did he decide to do? The first thing he had to do was to re-educate the world. In other words, they don't understand what I'm telling them, because you see, what he's bringing in is a new world order. It's not God's order. In fact, what I'm going to show you today, they just have agreed to the Christian faith calling it Chrislam, and they have agreed that as a national title for Christians. I'm going to show you that. That was just done yesterday. Again, within that 7-year time frame of what we're looking at. And who could forget Greta Thunberg? The re-education process for the global dominance begins this May 14th. That was in 2020. It's the revival of the Holy Roman Empire, the Beast of Revelation, which kicks into full speech in its march toward the 2030 agenda. Now, the second beast. The Revelation 13 actually has two beasts. And he had, this is the second beast says, he had power to give life to the image of the beast. What beast? He's talking about the first beast. In other words, what the first beast couldn't do, the second beast comes in and gives it to him. That's what Prince Charles is asking the world to do. Fulfill this verse. That the image of the beast should speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. The first beast you find in Revelation 13, 1 through 10. The second beast is in Revelation 13, 11 through 18. You might want to mark that and go home and read that, because you see you're living in those days right now. Why are there two beasts, though? Because when you look at them, they're interacting with one another. In fact, Revelation 17 says that the woman is riding the beast, the woman being a church, tells the beast what to do. So when you're looking at this, you're looking at this woman riding this beast, telling him what to do. But there's two legs of the beast from 13. One is a religious and one is a power, military type style business beast. I'm going to show you how that works today. Revelation 17 shows us the power of Rome and this beast. Now, I won't have time to go through it, but I've got here, now if you look at this, it says the beast of Revelation. In the last 2 years, we talked about the rise of the beast in Revelation. We go through each head of the 7 heads of Revelation 17. And in those heads, you see that the first head begins when there was the complete control, civil and religious. See, what the Pope has is religious. He didn't have the civil yet. Prince Charles is saying, let's give him the civil. When you see that, that brings about the 7th head, the last revival of the Roman Empire, 10 national rulers under a single leader. Revelation 13, 15 says, and he gave power to the image of the beast. What we didn't know when I gave that sermon, could it be in 2015 or 2022? What we just witnessed in 2022, this Shemitah period, because you see he was in that 7th year when he delivered that speech, is going to be fulfilled in 2022 from 23 into 29. It took place right up in here to marshal the people to fulfill that prophecy. The 6th head gives us why there are 2 beasts, not one. It's called the Lateran Treaty in 1929. Of course, that was the 6th head of the beast. All right, you see in 17. Let's take a brief look at that, because what we need to understand is why there's 2 beasts that work together, which are the 2 legs of the power to the end-time beast of Revelation. So now we bring up this headline, Italian church and state. See, the church and state has to come to work together again. That's what it was from the beginning, all the way through, church and state. The Vatican City on June 7th, all Rome was resounded. To the pealing of joyous bells today as Premier Mussolini and Cardinal Gaspari solemnly exchanged ratifications of the historic Lateran Treaty, bringing an end to the lifelong strife of church and state. Prince Charles says the only way this is going to work, we're going to get everybody together. We're going to put the church and the state back together again with 10 toes, 10 leaders, and one powerful person with the charisma to deceive the whole world. So that's what we're looking at. The Lateran Treaty, there's 3 key events that take place in this Lateran Treaty. Pope Pius further agreed that the Pope would intervene in foreign affairs, not as a head of sovereign, but as a head of the church and state. Italy gave Rome its independence and power and sovereignty if they agreed not to step back into the civil. So according to this agreement, there has to be someone else who brings that in that he controls. That's what's beginning to take place right now. He also established the validity of church marriage in Italy, provided compulsory religious instruction for Catholic school children, going to raise up the children to be Catholics. All around in New Orleans, you see signs, come home. This is the Catholic Church. They come back home again. the Protestant church era, were the Protestants, the protesters who came out of the mother church. So he's trying to make way to come home. So when you see him working like Greta Thunberg, who they going with? Just like Hitler did. When he's going to build his 1,000-year reign, you go after the children. Who is our government trying to take control of today? Our children from us. Teaching them everything that is ungodly and telling us we don't have a right to tell our children right from wrong anymore. And the third thing is that they declared Roman Catholicism to be Italy's only religion of state. That was the three important points of the Lateran. There was more, but that's the three important points. Now, the first beast of Revelation 13, 1 through 10. So what's he been doing? I'm going to show you that today. We're going to talk about what's he been doing for the last 7 years. And two, what's he been lacking? What's he been lacking is the opportunity to open that door to put church and state back together. Well, we just heard that speech, imploring everyone in the world to marshal together an army to put it together to save us. Not Christ, the army. It began with this, the Sustainable Development Goals. Remember, in 2015, here he is at the UN, told the whole world what he was going to do. It's amazing what God does for us. If we watch like Ezekiel did through God's eyes, we see what God sees. What we had a hard time trying to grasp back then, what he was trying to do is move God out and him in. The final battle will come down to God as being creator or worship the created, which is the green movement, Sustainable Development Goal. We must do that, sacrifice everything else. It was the first introduced as a single global UN objective to achieve 17 points, which now stands with 2 spearheads, the second being the Pope's encyclical. Revelation 17, verse 3 says, "So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on the scarlet beast, which was full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns." Here we see that this is going to be the woman who rides that beast power of chapter 13, which is going to be that global army coming together to save the planet. And he, this person, the Pope, will control it. I believe it'll be the next Pope. I don't believe that this Pope will be around for that. But it will take one who's a little stronger, a little more aggressive, and a little more powerful than this one. And this is why this Pope has set everything into place, even telling anyone associated with them of all their churches around the world to bring in all your money and put it in the Vatican before the end of September. I don't know if you heard that or not. Anyone, everyone associated, churches, schools, properties, whatever income money you have, bring it home and put it in the Vatican. And we'll watch it for you. He's also done a couple of other things. He's got a lot of cardinals now where he has controlling power if he decides to resign to put in place who will carry out his will. So he's been very busy. So what else has he been doing? All right, so what else has he been doing for these last 7 years? Let's take a quick look. Well, one thing's pretty powerful. One world religious headquarters set up in Dubai, set to open sometime the end of this year. It may not make it, but it's going to be very close. The headquarters is going to be called the Abrahamic Family House. It's being built on the island in the middle of the east of Abu Dhabi. He's being in collaboration with Pope Francis. The headquarters will be done in collaboration with Pope Francis and the Sunni Muslim leader, Sheikh Ahmed al-Taib. Amazing that the Muslims and the Christians were going to come together on Muslim ground. They both agreed to sign a global peace pact and a covenant called the Document of Human Fraternity for World Peace. Remember that Lateran Pact, what they had to have? One church. So he's pulling them together, and yesterday that began to happen. Chrislam confirmed, led by Pope Francis, leader of the world's religious formally adopt human fraternity document at the Seventh Congress. Isn't it amazing, the Seventh Conference? When did he deliver that first speech at the UN? 2015, right? Wasn't that about 7 years ago? So he's been busy. The world hasn't been taking notice. Why? Because we had to worry about our pronouns. We had to worry about how we offend somebody by calling them the wrong name. Unbelievable. The world's going to, I guess the phrase is the hell in a handbasket, while we're sitting around being woke. It's official, it says. Islam has now been codified and ratified. You see all those Christian leaders and Muslim leaders? With approval from the Seventh Conference of Leaders at the World Traditional Religions of the Human Fraternity document created by Pope Francis of the Vatican, financed and promoted by Mohammed bin Zayed of the UAE. The name of Jesus Christ is not mentioned anywhere in the document. When the Pope went to the UN, it was interesting. It wasn't caught by very many people, but he said, I come in my own name. He did not say he came in the name of Christ. He came in his own name. And it went by and no one noticed. That just happened yesterday. So what does part of this encyclical say? It was called part of the Fratelli Tutti, which is called from the UN to grant him power. This is what he's been asking for. What Prince Charles just fell right into, tripped over without ever realizing it. He wants to give him power, is what he's been asking for. He said, we need some form of world authority. Prince Charles has done just the Pope's bidding, calling the whole world to marshal together to give him power. I'm going to read this a little bit. It might be hard to follow, so if you listen to this. He said, still, such an authority ought least to promote a more effective world organizations equipped with the power to provide for the global common good. Does it sound like that speech? Going on. The elimination of hunger and poverty, ensure defense of fundamental human rights. They believe, if you follow their edicts, that the whole world is going to be better off and we're going to end hunger. First thing they're going to do. Jesus Christ says the poor and the hungry will always be with you. He thinks he's going to do more than Jesus Christ can. But what he was asking for in this document, Prince Charles marshaled people together to give it to him. Going on, he said, given this situation, it is essential to devise stronger, a more efficiently organized international institutions. That's what Prince Charles just said we need to have. With functionaries. Who are functionaries? Those are the people who are in control. Those are going to be 10 toes at the end time, coming together with one man in charge, who are appointed fairly by agreement among national governments empowered to impose sanctions. If they don't listen, they're not going to buy or sell. They still refused to obey this beast, will kill you. And you're going to begin seeing that coming up. Same year, 2020. Do you see how fast he's moving with this? He's marshaling the whole world. Something that's never been done in thousands of years. Capitalism met Catholicism on December 15th. The Council for Inclusive Capitalism with the Vatican, it says. These two meet. And what did they pull together? I didn't want to read all that because of time. It gave businesses their wings as leaders from major U.S. companies partnered with the Pope. Amazing, this Pope. Now he's got these business leaders coming together. He's got the religious leaders set in place. He's put in order a world religious combine, and now he's pulling in the second leg. And in the second leg, he's got 27 core members known as the Guardians of Inclusive Capitalism, who represent companies with over $2.1 trillion in market capitalization and 200 million workers. Oh, he's been busy. See, you know who this is? This is all the first beast. But he didn't have the power of state or the money or the control. Prince Charles is asking the world, give it to him right now. His agenda. This was from 2026, the same place where Prince Charles was. Something happened at that one. It's called the escalation of global governance. In 2020, the Pope says we need stronger, more governance. I just read it to you. So what happens in 2022, or 2021, I'm sorry, the next year? Setting the standards for the world's ESGs. It was called the WEF, the CDP, the IFRS. Now, what are they? The World Economic Forum, which will tell the world all of who these businesses are and how they operate. It will tell them how they disclose all their carbons. When you buy or you sell, you're not going to be able to buy and sell unless you keep your carbons down, or you are not going to be able to buy or sell, beginning of the buying and the selling of the beast. It also has the international financial reporting. So not only you who have to report how much carbons your businesses produce, you have to report the person who sells you the products to make your products and how much carbon they produce. And if you're over the limit, you don't get to buy or sell. You get penalized. They'll take your businesses away, or they'll fine you, put you in jail for hurting the planet. You know what's funny? This is not conspiracy. This is actual, in place, laws and statutes being set on this world right now as I speak. There is not one single conspiracy in this. Everything I'm giving you today has already happened, or as Prince Charles says, is going to happen. I hope you understand where we're moving to. Why is this important? Because I told you it was more important that we understand the timing of when he gave this speech versus what he said. Because you see, all these things have been in place. Now let's take a quick look at the second beast. Keep an eye on my time. All right, we're in good shape on time. The second beast of Revelation, 11 through 17, what has it been doing? And what's coming next? The ordination of another pope. That's Tom's opinion. I think this pope's moving on his last leg. I don't think he's going to be strong enough to be able to be in that position for what has to come next. The amount of speeches, the travel, the control, and the dominance, setting everything in its place that it's going to require to begin to keep those toes together to control the rest of the world. So I believe we're going to have at least one more pope, probably the last pope. And he's going to be appointing a military-like leader, someone with the charisma and the power of understanding businesses, how they operate, and how they associate with churches, and being able to control large infrastructures. It's going to take that individual. And last, there needs to be something that's going to light the fire to action. That's where Prince Charles comes into play. Now, the king. Now we have the King of England telling the whole world what needs to be done, and the whole world is applauding. We need to do this. Here in America, you're seeing people's businesses shut down. We're seeing the oil companies being shut out. We're seeing prices being gouged. They don't have anything to replace what they're removing. They don't have anything to replace it. Every time they do, every country that's tried it has failed and has to get rescued. It doesn't matter. We must save the planet. It is like God has taken the wisdom from all the leaders of the world now and put them into a basket, and they're just destroying everything. Every single thing they touch for this planet is destroying the planet, not fixing it. It doesn't matter. We're going that way. Why? Because Satan knows he has but a short time. That's where this is going to. You're seeing the final lineup between God and Satan in this final battle that's coming not too many years down the road. We brought all this stuff out just in July. We brought out this. Actually, July 15, just about 2 months ago. Physicists predict the Earth will become a chaotic world with dire consequences. This came out May 25th, 2022. They're seeing that the planet is being destroyed. They think what they're doing is going to fix it. It can't. Everything they do doesn't change the temperature of this planet by one almost iota. What's going on here is the curses from God that he said, if you disobey me, this is what's going to happen to you. All the planet needs to do. It doesn't take trillions. You don't need to marshal an army. You don't need to gather world religions. You need to go before God on your knees and repent. And God will put it all back in place. That's all it's going to take. But Revelation says, and they repented not yet. So he brings more curses, and they repent not yet. And Deuteronomy and Leviticus shows us 7 times greater each time. In each 7-year period that I put up here, we have seen greater destruction in this world. And it doesn't get any better. And they repented not yet. That's where we are. It says, if the earth system gets into the region of chaotic behavior, we will lose all hope of somehow fixing the problem. There's Prince Charles saying, hey, we're moving into this. So we need to come together so we can save the planet. Get God out of the picture, because you see, he's a real mess. He interferes with everything we're doing. Look in America. See, I believe there's a deliberate attempt for a civil war to be coming into play. I don't know how you feel about that. I think it'd be one of the most destructive things we'll ever see in our nation at the end time. But they're lining up everyone to hate on these two sides. And the rhetoric is so emotional, volatile now. It's like it just ignites somebody, says, and I even heard one politician talked about the Republicans says, we have to kill that movement. I've never heard a politician say that before. They have to kill the movement. Kill the movement. Interesting. Now, possible someone to appoint. We began talking about this quite a few years ago. I'm going to bring this back again because you see, I think he's still number one on the list. We don't know who they're going to appoint as that position to run those 10 toes in this combine of businesses that's going to be running the world. But it talks about someone who has this power and charisma that he does. Karl Theodor Zuttenberg, he descended from royalty. His grandfather, his mother's father, was the late German Count Volkar, the Count of Baron Gutenberg, who is descended from the noble house of Eltz. Reuter says that Germany had never seen a politician like him. He is a descendant of Leopold II of the Holy Roman Emperor. And so we need a new head of the Holy Roman Empire to come together, and he is the likely candidate. A powerful person. He got caught. They said he plagiarized some paperwork, and so he came to America, and next thing you know, he's setting up and running more businesses here in America, and now he's back over in Germany. Someone to a top. Now look at his wife. His wife, Stephanie, also from royalty. The Baron's wife, meanwhile, is Stephanie, the Countess of Bismarck, Schoenhausen, great-great-granddaughter of the Iron Chancellor Otto von Bismarck. Remember the giant military vessel, the War Machine in World War II? The biggest German vessel they ever built was called the Bismarck. Absolutely ran around the world and absolutely destroyed the American ships until it was finally stopped. Her great-grandfather masterminded the unification of Germany in 1871 and served as the first Chancellor of Germany until 1890, in which capacity he dominated European affairs. These two have come together now and believe that it is possible that they will be that person who could be in charge of the next leg of putting together the Holy Roman revival. They say he's a charismatic leader. Daniel tells us and Revelation shows that he's going to have to be that type of person. He brings authority with his words as a military leader and a government leader. He was in the military and the government. He was the economics minister from mid-2009 to March 2011 when he became the defense minister. So he's got a warlike mind and attitude of being able to put all this together. So there's no doubt whatsoever that I'm political. I'm a political animal, he said. He liked that. This man is gritty. I mean, he doesn't mind telling you what he thinks, and he shows no mercy. I don't mind telling you whatsoever, he says. I'm a political animal. Amazing. I mean, he bragged about that. He was. Here's a warning from Harry Beckoff, 2011. He was 97 years old. He was a former World War II codebreaker in the UK, Harry Beckoff, and he stated then, he may be Europe's next Führer. A Führer. He called him a European Führer, not Germany. European Führer. I've got this video. It's from actually the trumpet. And I've only got about 3.5 to 4 minutes of it, of a speech that Erich von Gutenberg gave. But you're going to need to read it because he speaks in Germany. They give a little intro in English. But I want you to hear the tone in how he ruthlessly goes after the things he doesn't agree with. Let's play that last video.
Now it looks as if Angela Merkel is going to be re-elected in German elections later this month. But that doesn't mean the crisis is over, and that doesn't mean that Germany's leadership problems are going to be fixed. In fact, the quiet crisis will probably only get worse. This means there's a good chance that Germany, even after the election later this month, will not have the leader that the German people desire. And this is the context in which we're watching Karl Theodor zu Gutenberg. Last Monday, Karl Theodor zu Gutenberg delivered a speech that may end up being a landmark speech in his political career. Zu Gutenberg spoke at the Gilmore's Beer Festival. This is the most powerful, the most compelling, the most forceful, the most dynamic speech that I've seen zu Gutenberg give. And it wasn't just his delivery that was compelling, it was the content. He spoke eloquently about the main issues on the minds of the German people. We wanted to share 2 or 3 snippets of the speech so that you can get a sense for KT zu Gutenberg's style of speaking. In this first clip, KT talks about how the world is on fire. He makes the point that there are multiple crises and that Germany needs to stop being passive. Germany needs to stand up and lead more in the world. Germany needs to rise up and defend Western civilizations.
Wir hatten dann den Brexit. Wir hatten eine bemerkenswerte Wahl in den USA, meine Damen und Herren. Wir haben Brandherde an allen Ecken und Enden dieser Welt. Unsere deutsche Haltung, meine Damen und Herren, unsere bayerische Haltung, unsere europäische Haltung kann das nicht sein. Es gibt noch jene, mit denen man jetzt Kontakte knüpfen kann, in der Wirtschaft, auch in der Politik, für eine Zeit, wenn dieser blonde Schachtelteufel sein Amt mal verlassen hat, damit wir auf Beziehungen wieder bauen können, meine Damen und Herren, die unserem Land nutzen, die dem transatlantischen Verhältnis nutzen und die letztlich dieser Welt nutzen, meine Damen und Herren. Daran haben wir jetzt zu arbeiten.
KT also spent a lot of time discussing the migrant issue. This was clever. And this was music to the ears of many Germans.
Dass eine klare Herangehensweise für jene gegeben ist, die ein Bleiberecht in unserem Land haben, aber eine ebenso klare Herangehensweise, meine Damen und Herren, für jene, die ihr Bleiberecht verwirkt haben. Wer sein Bleiberecht verwirkt hat, dieses Land so schnell wie möglich zu verlassen. So schnell wie möglich.
This next clip is short but dramatic. KT zu Gutenberg asks the question, how many Germans will have to die before Germany deals with the migrant crisis?
Wollen wir warten, bis Menschenleben aus dieser Welt gerissen werden? Wollen wir denen die Möglichkeit geben, sich so frei wie nur irgendwie möglich durch dieses Land zu bewegen? Oder wollen wir jene, die ja jetzt nicht irgend nur ein Trottel als Gefährder stigmatisiert, sondern wo auch Kriterien gefolgt wird? Wenn jemand als Gefährder eingestuft wird, dass der in den Augen, in richtigen Augen, in meinen Augen der CSU, dann auch überwacht und weggesperrt wird, meine Damen und Herren, wenn jemand als Gefährder eingestuft ist.
In this final clip, KT zu Gutenberg discusses the religion of Islam. This is a politically incorrect subject. This is a subject that most politicians will not touch.
Zumindest für unser Verständnis davon. Und dann fällt es mir schon schwer, darin nicht auch eine potenzielle Unterdrückung der Frau zu sehen, die in unserer Kultur nichts zu suchen hat, meine Damen und Herren. Nichts!
Sound familiar? Look familiar? That man has the same spirit, the same power and the charisma in his delivery, and he will mesmerize Europe. He has the power to put into place what King Charles is asking for. He will mesh with the Pope, because it says at the end, this individual will go after to destroy that woman. In other words, he will be taking control. He needs someone like that. It's possible. I don't know if he'll fulfill. But what I just showed you was just tippets. He stood there for 90 minutes and did that without a single note. Every now and then he'd stop and drink a beer. Put it down. He was at a beer fest. Mesmerized his audience. That was in 2017. All right, let's go on. Has the only authority to interpret the Bible Daniel 7:25? How about, who has that authority? The Catholic Church says they do. So they're changing everything right now. The Vatican declares that the Catholic Church is above the Bible. I don't know if you saw that or not. He said the Pope has the power to change times and abrogate laws, to dispense with all things, even the precepts of Christ. He said Paul has the authority to, and often exercised it, to dispense with the command of Christ. That's from their own dictionaries, from the Catholic Church. Does that sound familiar? Oh yeah, we read about that. It's in the Bible. It's called Daniel 7:25. He speaks with pompous words against the Most High, and shall persecute the saints of the Most High, and intend to change times and laws. Then the saints shall be given into his hands for times, and a half a time. Again, the Catholic Church is above the Bible. It said recently, there was a worldwide instigation when the Pope said some part of the Bible needs to be alterated. Like the Lord's Prayer. Kind of like in America, we say, that Constitution's wore out. We need to change that. But this is the Bible. We're talking about the Word of God. He says we need to begin to change some of the things in the Bible. He said the task of interpreting the Word of God authentically has been entrusted solely to the magisterium of the church. He said, that's me. He has the control to change the Bible. That is the Pope, and to the bishops in communion with him. They make no bones about that. Going on. He said the Pope is of so great authority and power that he can modify, explain, or interpret even divine law. The Pope can modify divine law since it is his power is not of man, but of God, and he acts as the venerate of God upon the earth. That again, coming from their own documentation. And he lives by those documents. So now we begin to come to the conclusion of this. The King of England, the same throne where Jesus Christ is going to sit when he comes back on this earth, has just turned his back on God. It said the only way to get this through is to turn it over to that man called the Pope. To give him power to appoint one man to put church and state back together. To bring about those final toes of Daniel and book of Revelation and the horns and put this power to work. And God is showing you and I that the time is in that 7 last final years in the Shemitah, the final complete 7. Whether there is any more time after that, I have no idea. Will it come before the 7 years? I don't know. But I'll tell you what is lining up. Every single thing this Bible said has to happen has come in the past. Now, there's still a lot that's got to be done. We don't have the 2 witnesses yet. There's still a covenant that has to be made. There still has to be armies down in Jerusalem. There's a lot that has to happen. But when I said that in 2020, and I looked out 10 years to that 2030 agenda, I'm thinking like, that's impossible to put this much together in 10 years. Well, more than half of it's gone already, and we're only in 2022. God says he's going to make a short work, and you're living in it. You got a choice to make. What are you going to do about it? Each one of us here have been called to be a light. We're looking at each one of these steps that he's taken as I'm clicking through, going through here, and realizing that this is not the only answer. It is the way of death. And I'm telling you, as I told you at the beginning, this proclamation is a proclamation of death. And anybody follows it is going to follow that path. Jesus Christ has showed us the better way. He has given us the hope and the reality that he will be there to put all of this down. And you and I have been given that opportunity to be a part of that work, to be that light before the world. Because you see, even the Christians today who know that this is getting close to the end time, all the Protestants of the world, they all think they're going to be raptured away. There's going to be a lot of people who's going to be very disillusioned. There's going to be a lot of people and a lot of work for you and I. So don't give up and don't be sucked into a bunch of lies, conspiracies, and all of these untruths that this world, this Pope, and the leaders bringing us to. And stick by God, and He will see you through the days that are ahead. Prophetic proclamation of doom. I'm giving you a proclamation of hope in life. Choose it. Choose it.